going on, guys? I want to talk to you today about somebody that you probably know everything that he did during the civil rights movement, but you don't know his name, and that's Bayard Rustin. Bayard Rustin was affectionately named Mr. March. He was the Mr. March on Washington because of how integral he was to the entire process. Bayard Rustin helped to organize some of the most influential things that happened during the civil rights movement: the Freedom Rides, the March on Washington, several marches everywhere. In 1947, he was arrested alongside the group that he co-founded, CORE, Congress of Racial Equality. They were arrested for their Journey of Reconciliation, which was basically the prototype for what would become the Freedom Rides. They were trying to make sure or test the SCOTUS ruling on Morgan v. Commonwealth of Virginia. That ruling proved that discrimination based off of race and interstate travel was unconstitutional. He would spend 22 days in a North Carolina chain gang. The next year, in 1948, he would go all the way to India personally so that he could study nonviolent resistance underneath the Gandhian leaders at the time. And this was something that even Dr. King had said he didn't have more than an academic understanding. Bayard going to India and Africa to learn these things was incredibly important for the movement because when he got back, he was able to teach the civil rights leaders here. He was a key advisor during the Montgomery bus boycotts. He would help Dr. King found the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. In a letter in December of 1956, he wrote to Dr. King that they absolutely needed to create a group that would unite the black leaders in the South. He helped to organize the Prayer Pilgrimage for Freedom. That was in 1957. In 1958 and 1959, him and A. Philip Randolph worked together to plan youth marches for integration of schools, which would bring us up to 1963 when he organized one of the largest marches in American history. Bayard Rustin and A. Philip Randolph helped to organize the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. So what was the issue with Bayard Rustin? If he was so influential and so important to the movement, why do we not learn about him? Why do we not know his name? Well, that's because Bayard Rustin was an out gay man. Not only was he a gay man, but he was a black man in the South, in America, in the 1950s. And on a cold but arguably steamy night in January of 1953, he was spotted having consensual sex with a partner in a parked car outside of a venue after an event. He had just given an amazing speech and he was exhilarated. One thing led to another, but at the time, being gay was actually the crime that he committed. It was common for gay men that were in consensual relationships to be arrested and jailed simply for the fact that they were in those relationships. I cannot stress enough that all of these acts were consensual, but even still, they would make these men register on the sex offenders list. Even through being arrested for a moral cause, this never actually stopped him from being out. Although he never spoke about it too often, he was not a closeted gay man. He was definitely out. And after his arrest in 1953, it just was common knowledge, which unfortunately came with a couple of things. There was a lot of pressure coming down from the more conservative politicians that were working with the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, the SCLC. Now remember, that was the organization that Bayard Rustin and Dr. King had been working together to create. And slowly it became commonplace to put him more and more and more in the background, even though they still needed his mind for logistics and execution. Whether the civil rights leaders liked it or not, Bayard Rustin was one of the best strategists that they had. And even Dr. King said that the movement wouldn't have been able to be where it was had it not been for him. Bayard Rustin was named the deputy director of the March on Washington. And Senator Strom Thurmond tried his best to bring up his old arrest record, but by that time, the leadership had just been like, there's no way that we're getting rid of Bayard for any reason. We need him here. They still tried to not put him up front as much as they could, though. Even though at the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, that is the place where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave his most famous speech of all time. Everybody knows that picture. The next week when the Times article came out about it, there was not a picture on the cover of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It was of Bayard Rustin. In his death in 1987, they never even mentioned in his obituary that he was a gay man, and they even tried to say that his partner at the time was an adopted son or an assistant that lived with him. Posthumously, in 2013, President Barack Obama gave him the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest honor a civilian can earn in the United States, not only as an activist for the Black community, but the LGBTQIA+ community as well. And finally, in February of 2020, Governor Gavin Newsom of California actually pardoned him for his crimes. I'm not going to mention that this is about 70 years too late, but the California statute that criminalized consensual sex with same-sex partners was abolished in 1975, and the governor's office has committed to the idea of pardoning all the people who were criminalized for that thing before it. Well, I hope you guys learned something about Mr. Marshawn Washington himself, Bayard Rustin. Happy Pride Month, y'all.